Look at this paradise. Crystal clear waters, pristine beaches, luxury resorts where celebrities spend their honeymoons. But what if I told you that this entire country could be underwater within our lifetime? The Maldives isn't just facing climate change, it's racing against time for its very survival. And the clock is ticking faster than you might think. By the end of this video, you'll understand why what happens to the Maldives affects all of us, and what we can do about it. The Maldives is unlike any other country on Earth. We're talking about 1,192 coral islands scattered across an area the size of Portugal. But here's the thing that makes this place truly unique. The Maldives is the lowest country on the planet. The average height above sea level? Just 1.5 meters. That's about the height of a short person. The highest natural point in the entire country is only 2.4 meters above sea level. To put that in perspective, if you're standing on the highest point in the Maldives, you could probably touch the roof of a single-story house without stretching. Now, you might be wondering, how does a country like this even exist? How do you build a nation on what are essentially sandbanks in the middle of the ocean? It all started 60 million years ago with underwater volcanoes. As these volcanoes sank back into the ocean, coral reefs kept growing upward, chasing the sunlight. Over millions of years, these reefs formed the ring-shaped atolls we see today. Think of it like nature's own skyscraper construction project, except instead of steel and concrete, it's built entirely by tiny marine animals working 24/7 for millions of years. It's one of nature's most incredible construction projects. But here's the problem. What took millions of years to build could disappear in just decades. Before we talk about what's at risk, let me show you what makes these coral reefs so special. Because once you understand what we could lose, the urgency becomes crystal clear. Think of coral reefs as underwater rainforest. These reefs around the Maldives support over 1,100 species of fish. That's more biodiversity per square meter than most places on land. You've got manta rays with wingspans wider than a small airplane, some reaching 7 meters across. Whale sharks longer than a school bus, gentle giants that can live for over 100 years, and thousands of colorful fish species that look like they were painted by an artist having the best day of their life. But here's what blew my mind when I first learned about this. A single coral reef can support more species than an entire forest. We're talking about parrotfish that actually eat coral and poop out sand. Yes, those beautiful white beaches are literally fish poop. Cleaner fish that run underwater, car washes for larger fish. Clownfish that live in perfect harmony with sea anemones. But here's what's really amazing. All of this incredible life depends on tiny coral animals no bigger than your fingernail. These corals have a partnership with microscopic algae that live inside them. The algae provide food through photosynthesis, and the corals provide protection. It's a perfect partnership that's been working for millions of years, but it's also incredibly fragile. A temperature change of just 1 to 2 degrees can destroy it all. In 2016, something devastating happened to the Maldives. The ocean temperature rose by just 1 to 2 degrees Celsius above normal. That might not sound like much. After all, we experience bigger temperature swings in our daily weather. But for coral reefs, it was catastrophic. When corals get stressed by heat, they expel their algae partners. Without the algae, the corals turn white. That's called bleaching. And if the stress continues, they die. In 2016, 95% of Maldivian reefs experienced bleaching. Let me put that in perspective. Imagine walking through a forest and seeing 95% of the trees suddenly turn white and start dying. That's what happened underwater across an entire nation. Marine biologists who were there during the bleaching event described it as heartbreaking. Reefs that had been vibrant and colorful for decades turned into underwater graveyards almost overnight. Now you might be thinking, well, can't the reefs recover? And that's actually a great question. Some can, if conditions improve quickly enough. Corals are surprisingly resilient. They've survived ice ages and volcanic eruptions. But here's the problem. These bleaching events are happening more frequently. What used to be a once-in-a-lifetime event is now happening every few years, and each time, fewer corals survive. It's like asking someone to run a marathon, then before they've fully recovered, asking them to run another one, then another one. But there's another threat that's even more serious, and it's happening so gradually that most people don't even notice it. Remember how I said the Maldives averages just 1.5 meters above sea level? Well, sea levels are rising. And for a country this low, every centimeter matters. This isn't some distant future problem. It's happening right now. During high tides, seawater already floods streets in some areas. Local people call these king tides, and they're becoming more frequent and more severe. I want you to imagine living in a place where you have to check the tide tables before leaving your house, because if you time it wrong, your street might be underwater when you try to come home. Here's a number that should worry everyone. If sea levels rise by just 1 meter, which many scientists think is likely this century, 77% of the Maldives land area would be regularly flooded. We're talking about an entire country potentially becoming uninhabitable. 540,000 people would need to find new homes. But the Maldivians aren't just sitting around waiting for this to happen. They're fighting back with some incredible engineering projects that honestly sound like science fiction. They're building seawalls that can withstand massive waves. They're creating artificial islands using sand pumped from the ocean floor. They're even constructing floating structures that rise and fall with the tides. The capital, Malé, has been expanded onto a completely artificial island called Hulhumalé, built 2 meters higher than the natural islands. It's designed to house 240,000 people, nearly half the country's population. It's like watching a country literally lift itself out of the rising ocean. But these projects cost billions of dollars that a small island nation can barely afford. Now, here's where this story gets really complex. Tourism makes up 65% of the Maldives' economy. About 1.7 million people visit every year, drawn by those pristine beaches and crystal clear waters. The average tourist spends about $1,650 during their visit. For a country with a population smaller than most cities, that tourism money is literally what keeps the economy afloat. But tourism depends entirely on the very things that climate change is threatening: healthy coral reefs, stable islands, and predictable weather patterns. When the reefs bleach, the fish disappear. When the fish disappear, the snorkeling and diving experiences that tourists come for are ruined. It's a cruel irony. The flights that bring tourists to this paradise contribute to the carbon emissions that are threatening its existence. A single round-trip flight from Europe to the Maldives produces about 3 tons of CO2 per passenger, and yet, tourism provides the money needed for conservation and adaptation projects. The Maldivians have found themselves in an impossible situation. They need tourism to survive economically, but tourism contributes to the problem that threatens their survival. So what are they doing about it? The answer might surprise you. The Maldives has become one of the world's most vocal advocates for climate action. And they're not just talking, they're acting in ways that put much larger, wealthier countries to shame. The country is rapidly switching to renewable energy. Solar panels are appearing on resort roofs and floating on lagoons like lily pads made of technology. They've committed to becoming carbon neutral by 2030. That's more ambitious than most developed nations. But perhaps most importantly, they're working to save their coral reefs with techniques that sound like something out of a sci-fi movie. Scientists and local communities are growing new corals in underwater nurseries, like gardeners tending to seedlings. They're selecting coral varieties that can better handle warmer water, essentially trying to help evolution along. They're even experimenting with supercorals that have been bred to be more heat-resistant. It's like underwater gardening, and it's showing real results. Some restored reefs now have 60 to 80% coral cover. Fish are returning to areas that were underwater deserts just a few years ago. The Maldives is also leading international efforts to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Their president has spoken at the UN, held underwater cabinet meetings to highlight the crisis, and formed alliances with other small island nations. The story of the Maldives is really the story of our entire planet. It's about how everything is connected: the carbon we emit in our cities, the oceans that absorb it, the reefs that depend on stable conditions, and the people whose lives depend on those reefs. But it's also a story of hope and human ingenuity. The Maldives is proving that we don't have to be passive victims of climate change. We can adapt, we can innovate, and we can fight back. The question is, will the rest of the world act fast enough to help them succeed? Here's what you can do. Support sustainable tourism when you travel. Choose airlines that are investing in cleaner technology. reduce your carbon footprint through the choices you make every day, and most importantly, support policies and politicians who take climate change seriously, because the Maldives won't be the last place to face these challenges. They're just the first. Miami, Venice, Bangkok, New York, coastal cities around the world are watching the Maldives very carefully, because what happens there is a preview of what could happen to them. So here's my question for you. If you could visit the Maldives, what would you most want to see or do? And more importantly, what actions are you taking to help protect places like this? Let me know in the comments below. If this video opened your eyes to the reality of climate change and the incredible resilience of the human spirit, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about how our changing planet affects real people and places.